Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto was Shinobi Ashikabi. If you guys enjoyed this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So now let's start this video. The group arrived home an hour later. The sun was still up, so it wasn't quite time to start dinner yet. Naruto planned on seeing if he could either help Miyu with her cooking when she did, or hopefully take over kitchen duty for the day, in order to be away from his Sekirei and everyone else so he could think. It was another surprising development about Naruto. He had always hated cooking when he was younger, preferring to stick with cup ramen when he had to eat at home. However, after the time of the shinobi came to an end and Naruto became a wonder, he had picked up an appreciation for cooking. Being an immortal meant that Naruto had a lot of free time on his hands, and since he had so much free time, the blonde had picked up various hobbies, one of them being cooking. Originally, Naruto had learned how to cook in order to help him seduce women. Very few things seem to impress a woman than a man who can actually cook his own food and cook it well, a fact that he had proven time and time again throughout the ages. However, as time went on, Naruto began to truly enjoy the act of cooking in and of itself. Much like gardening, cooking was something that he could do himself. It was timeless, ageless, and the only thing that changed were the recipes and new dishes that came out. It also allowed him to think. Naruto's skills as a chef had gotten to the point where he didn't even need to think about what he was doing while making his way around a kitchen. He was so talented that he could allow his mind to wander as his instincts did all the work for him. When they entered the boarding house, Naruto noticed that Uzume's sandals were already resting off to the side of the front door. There was a loud bump coming from the dining room, followed by what sounded like shouting. Miya's head snapped in that direction as well. But the frown, he, Akitsu, Musubi, and Miya, with Kusano on his shoulders, made his way into the dining room where they discovered an unusual scene. Uzume was there, hands on her hips as she looked down at a pile of twitching clothes. It took Naruto to recognize the pile as Sayo, mainly because it looked like he had face planted the ground. There was a large lump on his head that was distinctly recognizable as the results of physical violence. Seeing as to how Uzume was standing over him in an annoyed stance and the look on her face, she was most likely the culprit to the suspicious lump. Ow, Sayo grunted as he pulled his face off the tatami mat and looked at Uzume with an annoyed twitch in his right eye. Damn it, Uzume, I said I was sorry. He winced as he touched the lump on his head. Did you have to hit me so hard? He asked with a whine. Of course I did, Uzume said, a very rare scowl on her face. Come to think of it, Naruto had never actually seen the woman scowl before. Ever. Removing her arms from her hips, the star-shirted Sekirei placed them under her bust. Only my Ashikabi allowed to grope me like that, her eyes narrowed, and you are most definitely not my Ashikabi. Well, at least now Naruto understood the woman's sudden hostility. He had never seen Uzume angry before, and truthfully had not thought she could actually get angry. But if there was one thing that he was coming to realize, it was that to a Sekirei, their Ashikabi was everything. His own Sekirei were the perfect example of that. Akitsu was completely subservient to him. Naruto didn't doubt that if he asked her to, she would jump off a cliff. Musubi seemed to hold the bond between Sekirei and Ashikabi as something almost spiritual, and Kusano, while she might not really understand the whole Ashikabi-Sekirei relationship, loved her Oni-chan with all her heart. Even the last thoughts of Yomi, the Sekirei Naruto had defeated, had been of her Ashikabi, calling out to him before she had shut down. I already told you it was an accident, Sayo grumbled and complained, tenderly poking the lump on his head and wincing each time. Naruto found this small act of insanity amusing if nothing else. Right, Uzume drawled out, her voice so laden with sarcasm that it could not really be called sarcasm. Let me guess, your hand slipped. No, wait, I know. You tripped over a bump on the tatami mat, and your hand just happened to reach out and grope by tits. Sayo looked like he was about to respond, his mouth halfway open, when he froze. In fact, the entire room had frozen over as the dark, malignant presence of malice and hatred slithered into the dining room. Uzume and Sayo's heads turned, slowly, oh so slowly, to face the source of this evil, their movements almost mechanic. It looked like they were trying to fight this strange compulsion but couldn't. It was instinct, after all, to look into the face of a predator even though you knew you shouldn't. Standing in the doorway, Miya looked at the pair with a beatific smile, her eyes crinkled shut. However, their eyes were not quite focused on the woman herself. Slithering out behind her, the clacking of wooden blocks, came the source of the corrupted presence. The purple Hanyu mask hissed at them, its mouth open, tongue sticking out in a horrific display, and its eyes bleeding profusely. Everyone was affected by the mask of terror to some degree or another. Akitsu had stiffened, her head turned away from the sight of supreme horror, and the area around her began to fog over. Musubi had hidden herself behind Naruto, her hands clutching the back of his shirt, as she peeked over the edge of his shoulders and around Kusano to look at Miya. As for the green girl herself, she had hidden her face in Naruto's hair, and was clenching his golden locks so tightly he felt they might get ripped off his scalp. Uzume and Sayo had the worst of it. Being the ones who Miya had her attention on, the two were faced to bear the full brunt of her mental torture. Sayo had backed himself against the far wall, as far away from the lavender-haired woman as he could manage. Even then he was still trying to press himself further against the wall. While Uzumaki had not moved from her spot, her own reaction was just as pronounced. She was sitting on the ground, her knees drawn up to her chest as she rocked back and forth muttering, "Oh God, its eyes are bleeding. I hate it when its eyes are bleeding." Uzumaki, Miya spoke in that delightful voice that sent shivers down the spine and froze the heart cold. Uzumaki froze, like an animal that knew the predator had seen it, but hoped against hope that if they would just remain still, it would overlook them. Unfortunately for her, that wasn't the case here. The use of such crude language, especially in the presence of children, is strictly forbidden at Meizumizumo. Uzumaki said nothing. She looked like she was just a second away from needing a quadruple bypass soon due to her heart giving out. Fortunately, that seemed to appease the vision of horror enough that it moved on to its next victim, leaving the busty Sekirei to almost sag in relief. "And you, Sayo," Miya turned on the man, freezing him in his tracks. The way she said his name, drawing it out with a long-suffering and disappointed sigh, was almost as terrifying as the mask itself. Sayo seemed to think so anyways, if the way his eyes darting about to search out an exit when she spoke was any indication. It seems you need another reminder that lewd actions towards others are strictly forbidden at Meizumizumo. With the fringe bangs of her hair covering the upper half of her face in shadows, all Sayo could see was the evil smile that peeled back the woman's lips. "Remember that while you are under this roof, you must always follow the rules. After all, you never know what might happen if you don't." "Sure thing, Miya, ahahaha, ahahaha." Sayo stuttered and laughed the laugh of insanity. It was the kind of laugh someone had when they started to lose their mind, when their higher mental functions slowly eroded away, leaving nothing more than an empty husk. A vegetable. Fascinating. Miya blinked. The room blinked. As one, all the people there turned to find that sometime during Miya's lecture, Naruto had set Kusano on Musubi's shoulders, and had moved just a few inches away from Miya, so he could take a closer look at her Hanyu mask. So it's not just a method of visual terror, but audio terror as well, he muttered to himself. His hand twitched, as if he wanted to poke and prod the mask with a stick, but was holding back for fear that doing so might break the technique. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he stared into the bleeding eyes of the terrifying spectacle. It also seems to have multiple variations of itself. The last one didn't have bleeding eyes, or the tongue, or the clacking and hissing. I wonder if this is some form of killing intent. Perhaps a killing intent-based illusion. Or is it even an illusion? Unable to resist the urge anymore, Naruto reached out with a hand to touch the vision of horror that had frozen everybody else in place. However, just as Naruto's fingers were about to reach the object of his fascination and everyone else's horror, it disappeared. "No?" Naruto shouted, his eyes widening. He turned to Miya with his specialized Shigata Inu no Mi, super large puppy dog eyes, a technique he had spent many years developing and perfecting 1 century, when he had grown bored. It was the most fearsome jutsu in his arsenal. No female to date had ever withstood its might. And he could ill afford to have it fail him now. He had been so close. "Can you show it to me again?" he asked, his lips quivering as he held his hands in a prayer sign in front of his face. "Please. He wants to see it again." Uzumaki whispered in shock. He must have stones the size of baseballs, large, brass baseballs. It was a sentiment that everyone in the room seemed to agree with. At least, everyone in the room who knew what stones meant in this particular case. Miya tilted her head to the left, looking at him with a curious expression. After a moment, she slowly raised her right hand to her cheek. And smiled at him. "Oh?" Miya pressed a hand to her cheek as her face took on a thoughtful look. "Show you what again?" she said, and if this were an anime, Naruto would have face faulted. This wasn't an anime, and so all Naruto ended up doing was stumbling as he lost his composure, and his most feared jutsu of all time disappeared. "Show me what?" Naruto cut himself off, blinking several times as he looked at Miya, in what could only be considered a combination of confusion, frustration, and desperation. "But you made it, didn't you?" he asked, ignoring the way both Uzumaki and Sayo were waving their arms frantically at him, in order to make his stop. "I know you're the one who made that mask. Please, just let me see it for a few more seconds." "As I said, I have no idea what you're talking about," Miya smiled beatifically at him. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the woman, an almost scowl forming on his lips. So this was how she wanted to play. Fine, two could play at this game. Naruto set himself in a pose, feet spread shoulder width apart, left hand on his hip, right hand raised with the index finger pointed at Miya. He had a fierce look of determination on his face as he went into a pose that most would expect to find from the characters of a shonen manga. It was a pose he had used quite often in his youth, before manga had even existed, and it seemed to be making its comeback now. "I'm going to learn that technique," he declared, eyes narrowing further until they were mere slits, making him look like a fox. It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, it may not even be several weeks from now, but I am going to learn that technique, he finished, punctuating the last 3 words in emphasis of just how determined he truly was to learn the secrets behind Mia's Hanyu mask. Mia narrowed her own eyes. The normally calm face was now set in a look of challenge. Sparks began to fly from their eyes, striking each other within the small space between them, and filling the air with the sound of crackling and the sizzling of ozone. It seemed that she was unwilling to let Naruto just take this technique. That was fine with him. He wasn't like those damned Uchiha, stealing techniques out of hand with those minky marbles they called eyes. Unlike them, he could respect the amount of time and effort it probably took Mia to create that technique. But that didn't mean he was just going to ignore such an incredible ability. He would show her his respect by learning this technique through hard work, he would. Hey, you two. That cut off the by sound of someone speaking. Naruto and Mia both turned their heads, the looks they had been giving each other still in place as they looked at Sayo, who took a step back at seeing the identical looks on the pair's faces. Yes, Sayo, what do you want? Mia's melodious voice was complemented by Naruto's gruff response. Sayo blinked as he looked back and forth between the two. He opened his mouth to say something, but closed it just as quickly. After another second, the gruff Ashikabi shook his head and gave the pair an amused look. You know, when you two do that identical thing it makes you look like an old married couple, he commented lightly, the previous fear he felt from the Hanyu mask having apparently vanished. Judging from the tone and manner in which he spoke of Mia so easily in spite of what he had just seen, the man must have been a pretty old acquaintance of the woman. He probably had a lot of experience with her technique. Naruto took note of that and stored it into the back of his mind for later perusal, when he began working on his own technique. It seemed like prolonged exposure to Mia's Hanyu mask diminished the effects. At the very least, those who had more experience with it were able to pull themselves together faster than those who had less experience. Point in fact, Uzumaki was beginning to recover again, while Naruto's own Sekirei were still shaking in fear. Except for Kitsu, she was still looking off to the side surrounded by fog. Oh my, Mia pressed her hands against her cheeks. An old married couple, you say? Naruto was surprised when she gave the man an almost condescending look. It was something he had never seen on her before. Perhaps it would be best if the freeloader keeps his opinions to himself, she sniffed. Rather than be offended by the woman's words, Sayo merely laughed, before turning to Naruto. Hey kid, fancy meeting you here. He greeted Naruto cheerfully, completely missing the way the blonde's right eye began to twitch. This was the second time someone used an euphemism with the implication that he was younger than them. Naruto knew he shouldn't let it bother him, he knew he looked young. Physically speaking, he had not aged a day since receiving his curse. If Naruto went to a doctor right now and received a full exam, all anybody would be able to deduce was that the blonde was a ridiculously healthy 18-year-old male with an immune system that put all others to shame. He knew that, and he knew that it meant people would assume he was a kid. But goddammit if it didn't piss him off when people acted like they were older than him. Sayo, Naruto greeted with forced civility. I honestly didn't expect to meet you again, except for maybe on opposite sides of the Sekirei plan. Ha! The man barked out a laugh. I wasn't expecting to see you for a while either, much less here at Izumo. He looked at Naruto with a casual look of calculated indifference. So I take it you winged the green girl then? He asked, his eyes glancing over to where Kusano was only just now getting over her case of the jitters from Mia's fearsome technique. Well, he shrugged before turning back to Naruto, not even giving said blonde a chance to confirm or deny his question. If you're staying at Izumo then that can't be a bad thing. Thanks, I guess, Naruto replied easily. Getting his thoughts in order, the blonde was quick to bring up a point he had been wondering about. Seeing as how you managed to get into this house so easily, I can take it you're an acquaintance of Mia-chan's. Mia-chan? Sayo blinked, before laughing. He looked over at the Lavenderette in both surprise and humor. You actually let him call you Mia-chan? He said, trying and failing not to laugh. In the end, the gruff-looking Ashikabi ended up holding his gut as his body shook with mirthful laughter. Naruto frowned at the response, wondering just what this man found so funny about how he addressed the landlady. Sure, Mia held that air most people associated with those who were to be given the utmost respect, but Naruto had never given any of the people he had known like that even a modicum of respect. At least, not in the way that most people do. And besides, Mia was lucky he hadn't decided to come up with a derogatory nickname for her like he had the others. I can't believe she let you call her that. Sayo gasped, still in the throes of vengeful giggles. He seemed to have forgotten everything and everyone else in the face of this new and apparently hilarious development. The sure must be going soft. And just like that, the man speaking came to bite him in the ass. Sayo. Mia's voice warned the man of his imminent demise. At the sound of the woman's voice, the cold creeping darkness began to once again encroach upon the room. Sayo gulped, his eyes widening in fear as he finally seemed to realize his mistake. However, like a man latching onto a lifesaver in the middle of a typhoon, Sayo was quick to point out the one thing that might save him. Insulting your host while inside of Izumo is strictly forbidden. Wait. he squeaked, his voice sounding dangerously high-pitched. It was too bad Naruto didn't have a camcorder or at least a voice recorder on him. That would have been good blackmail material. Wait, Mia. He held up his left hand in a defensive gesture that really wouldn't have done anything in the face of Mia's horrifying technique. However, he seemed to have a trump card. Naruto's still watching you. And just like that, the feeling was gone. The Hanyu mask, which had been just about to creep out behind Mia's lithe form, disappeared as if it had never existed. The Lavenderette frowned, her eyes flickering from Sayo to Naruto as she pursed her lips in indecision. Sayo sighed, and made an exaggerated motion of wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Ah, thanks man," he said to Naruto with a smirk. It looked like the gruff Ashikabi was a lot smarter than he sometimes acted. He had been able to deduce that Mia would be unlikely to use her technique in the blonde's presence anymore, now that she knew he was interested in learning it from just that small exchange. "I owe you one," he continued, seemingly proud that he had managed to find a way to stop Mia from using her mask. Naruto frowned as he looked at Sayo. He didn't like being used by anyone. Still standing next to Naruto from their showdown, Mia huffed in an annoyance that she wouldn't be able to enlighten Sayo on the proper way to treat your host. After a moment, Naruto's frown became a smile. "You know, Mia," he said, his tone casual. "I was thinking, we haven't been very good hosts." Mia blinked at him, her head tilting to express her confusion. Naruto's smile widened. "I mean, Sayo came all this way over here just to see you, and we haven't even made him some tea yet. I was thinking, maybe I should go make some for everyone while you and he get reacquainted." Naruto spoke the last part with a smile he had been known for in his youth. The grin that stretched so wide his eyes were forced closed and his whisker mark stretched across his cheeks, giving him a very vulpine appearance. It was the smile of the long-forgotten prankster. "After all, I'm sure you both have so much to talk about." The smile that Mia returned Naruto was almost identical, minus the whisker marks. "Why yes, I do believe you are correct, Uzumaki-kun. Thank you for managing to catch and correct my oversight. It seems I will have to apologize for not being as attentive a host as I should have," she said appraisingly, and Naruto got the feeling she was quite grateful for the chance to properly browbeat the scruffy Ashikabi before her without Naruto's presence, interrupting her technique. Sayo paled as he realized where Naruto was going with this. His eyes darted left, then right, then centered on Mia. I actually need to be leaving soon. You see, I left my girls back home and didn't tell them where I was going. No doubt they're worried about me. I should really be getting along back to them so I can assure them I'm alright. So yeah, see ya. Burk." Sayo tried to turn around and rush out the back door that led into the courtyard, only to freeze when Mia appeared directly behind him and placed a hand on his shoulder, her hold stronger than a steel bar. "So, Misubi-chan, Akitsu-chan, Ku-chan," Naruto looked at his three Sekirei. "Would you like to join me while I prepare some tea for our guest?" "Yes. I would love to," Misubi shouted as she threw her hands into the air above her head. Still sitting on her shoulders, Kusano also threw her hands up in imitation of the older Sekirei, while giving out her customary mmhm noise. Akitsu was the only one who seemed to actually realize what was going on. Her eyes went from the shivering form of Sayo still in Mia's grip to Naruto, then she nodded slowly. "Yes," she said. "Then let's head over to the kitchen," Naruto said as he began his march, his three Sekirei following him. It seemed he was about to gain one more to his small party joining him on his mundane task when Uzumaki quickly fell into step with him. "Hey bro, mind if I join you guys?" she asked. It was clear that she had realized what was about to happen, and wanted to get the hell out of Dodge before Mio unleashed her reign of terror on Sayo. "Not at all," Naruto replied with a smile. "In fact, the more the merrier I say." Uzumaki gave out her customary chuckle as she sent the blonde a grateful smile. "Thanks," she told him. "You're welcome." As the group of 4 Sekirei and 1 Ashikabi left, Sayo found himself getting desperate for some form of escape. He reached out to the retreating group as the door behind them closed, crying out to them in ever-increasing horror. "Wait, you guys wouldn't leave me here, would you? Guys, help. You know, I think I'm going to take back all those nice things I said about you," Sayo told Naruto as the blonde poured him a cup of tea and placed it in front of the man. He didn't even look at the cup as he grabbed it by the body and threw it back like it was alcohol and not a cup of tea. Naruto just smiled at him. "Perhaps you should let this be an abject lesson for you," Naruto replied to the man's words mildly as he began pouring everyone else a cup of tea as well. When he finished setting everyone up, he poured himself a cup and sat down in his usual seat. Just like always, Akitsu was sitting on his left. She still looked a little wary, occasionally turning her intense gaze off him to look at the now unthreatening Lavenderette, as if she would spontaneously bust out her mask at any second. It seemed that while the ice user never gave her surroundings much stock, Mia's mask of 1,000 terrors had terrified her enough that even the normally stoic and uncaring Akitsu was wary of her. On his other side, Kusano was sitting on his left, drinking a cup of orange juice through a straw instead of tea. She had already tried Naruto's and decided it was too yucky for her tastes. The green girl was sitting in between him and Yusubi, who was pouting at not being able to sit next to her Ashikabi. She had tried to claim the seat on his left, but somehow, just as the excitable girl in shrine maiden garb was about to sit down, a kitsu had appeared in the spot. The action had given Naruto the sudden premonition that this particular issue of seating arrangements would be coming up with much more frequency. Uzume was sitting at the end of the table. This would have surprised Naruto, but he had correctly assumed that she simply didn't want to sit near Sayo, due to the whole breast-groping incident that had happened before his arrival. Sayo was sitting opposite of him. The man looked quite shaken. Miya must have gone much harder on him than she usually did. If the screams the blonde had heard coming from this room were any indication of just how intense it was, then Naruto wasn't sure he could blame the man. And speaking of the lavenderette, Miya was once more sitting at the head of the table, casually sipping her tea as her perennial smile remained in place. She looked happy, much happier than she usually did. Naruto could only guess that she was inordinately pleased with herself for managing to truly to the fear of God into the scruffy Ashikabi. Of course, seeing the outcome just settled it in Naruto's mind. He was going to learn that technique even if it killed him. "Oh yeah?" asked Sayo with a sarcastic mutter. "And what lesson is that?" Naruto turned once more to look at the man. "That Uzumaki Naruto does not take well to being manipulated by anyone," he replied, the answer getting a look from not only Sayo but Miya and Uzume as well. "Ha!" The man laughed, the sound a bit forced as he shook his head. At least he was making a concerted effort towards overcoming the effects of whatever Miya had done to him. "I guess I should have seen that one coming," he admitted with a shrug. "You don't seem to be the type of person to put up with others' crap." "Not unless I have to," Naruto replied with unusual solemnity. Sayo laughed again, this time it sounded less forced. If the blonde was surprised by the scruffy Ashikabi getting his second win so soon, he didn't show it as he once more tried to get the answer he wanted to his curiosity. "So how do you know Miya-chan?" "Miya-chan?" The man looked like he was going to laugh again, but one look at Miya, his smile went evil for just a second, had him thinking better of it. Sayo shrugged as he turned his attention towards the blonde. "I was actually friends with Takedo before he and Miya even met." Naruto blinked, nonplussed. "You mean Miya-chan's husband?" he asked. "Yep," Sayo began, a reminiscing smile forming on his face. "Takedo and I were good friends in college. He was one hell of an upperclassman," the man admitted as he scratched the bottom side of his chin. "The guy was a frickin' genius." Of course, the scruffy man continued. "He was also a demon whose soul had been rotted, and he was a research idiot who couldn't handle anything besides his profession. As opposed to being a lazy nobody who can't hold a job to save his life," Miya shot back with a placid smile that belied her irritation. She didn't seem to like the fact that her husband's supposed best friend was saying such things about him. "I believe being a research idiot as you call him is far better than being the scum of the earth." Naruto noticed with slight humor that she didn't deny her husband having the soul of a demon. There was probably a story behind that. Sayo just laughed Miya's insults off as he turned back to Naruto and became a bit more serious, his smile turning a touch nostalgic with a hint of melancholy. "Despite our difference, he was someone even a person like myself could easily get along with. When he wasn't busy keeping his nose stuck in his job. Not to mention he was probably the only person who could actually stand Sayo-san," Miya added with a soft giggle. Sayo just rolled his eyes at the lavenderette. Yes, Naruto decided, there was definitely a story behind all of this. He would have liked to hear it, but didn't want to intrude on what was probably painful memories. "He sounds like an incredible person," Naruto said, thinking. This was really the first he had ever heard of Miya's late husband except for in passing. The blonde had never brought it up, not only because he had no desire to reopen old wounds, but also because it really didn't matter to him. While he would admit to being curious about Miya and her past, most of that was because of his surety in her involvement, or at least knowledge of, the Sekirei plan. Still, the news about the man she had married was interesting. Thinking along those lines, Naruto took a quick glance at Miya. The woman was calmly sipping her tea, and it looked like she was only paying marginal attention to the conversation going on around her. Naruto knew better though, he could see the way her eyes would occasionally flicker over to Sayo, then him. No doubt she was cataloging every word that was spoken here. The blonde also took in the sight of her smile. While it held the same gentleness it always had, there was just a trace of regret, bitterness, and longing in it that had the blonde pausing. It was a look he recognized, since it was similar to one he wore quite often himself. Miya hummed in agreement to Naruto's words as she set her cup down. "My husband truly was an amazing person. He was always willing to help others when they were in trouble, never turning away a person in need." She placed a hand over her heart. "He is someone I will never regret knowing." Naruto took the time to observe Miya some more. The way she spoke was very familiar to him. He remembered a time so long ago when he had thought like that once. How long ago had that been? When he had been able to still remember the good times he had shared with his precious people, before the memories began to leave a bitter taste in his mouth. It had to have been near the beginning of his new life after the war, before he knew he was cursed. That had been about 3,990 years ago, he thought. At least, it had to have been somewhere around that time. His perception of the past was blurry, so he couldn't be sure. Although, Mia began again, gracefully hiding a smile behind the left sleeve of her kimono as she giggled lightly. It does sadden me to know that my husband was forced to spend his time with scum like Sayo, even when we were together. Ouch, Sayo muttered, though he seemed to take the insult with a grain of salt. To Naruto, it looked like he had gotten so used to Mia making comments like this, that he had gotten so used to it to the point where he simply shrugged the heavy words off. Such harsh words, Mia, he whined. Do you really hate me that much? Of course not, Mia reassured him with a smile that was about as reassuring as a cat that had found a mouse within its paw. You may be the scum of the earth, can't hold a job to save your life, and only ever come to visit when you're running low on food, but you're still Takeito's best friend. And you think Mia-chan and I have a strange relationship, Naruto mumbled as he watched the byplay between the two. It was quite apparent that they had a long history. According to what he had deduced, they had likely met through Takeito, though Naruto only knew how the man Mia would later marry had met the woman herself was still unknown. It would be an interesting story, but the blonde was not one to bother asking about something like that. If Mia wished to tell him that was fine, but he wouldn't lose any sleep over it if she didn't. Naruto must not have been as quiet as he thought, because Sayo laughed a moment after he spoke. Yeah well, the scruffy Ashikabi shrugged with exaggerated nonchalance. Mia just loves to hate me. Really now, Mia huffed in obvious annoyance. It was an almost childish look, and went a long way to telling Naruto just how easily this man was capable of riling the woman up. There's no need to be so rude, she stated, though Sayo just waved the words off, before turning his attention back to Naruto. To be honest, I'm actually kind of surprised to see you here, he commented. The words were almost casual, but Naruto could detect a hint of sharpness to them. The look on his face, while still lazy, held a much more calculating glint to it than usual. The man was obviously much sharper than he let on. Why do you say that? Asked Naruto, taking a sip of his tea. Oh you know, the man started. It's just that with the way you've been going about everything I sort of expected you to be in the thick things. I mean, you're the miracle worker, after all. Naruto narrowed his eyes. That's the second time someone has called me that today, he began thoughtfully. So that Higazumi character was not the only person who knew of his status, then. Naruto was not sure that was a very good thing. He still knew so little about the Sekirei plan and Sekirei in general. That wasn't even going into the lack of information he had on the other people in this game. Knowing that he had so little information about the Goingans in this city was beginning to bother him. Knowledge was power, after all, and he was distinctly lacking in it. Despite this, Naruto forced himself to remain apathetic as he took the other Ashikabi in with a casual gaze. Sayo seemed to know some of what was going on, and perhaps Naruto could gain some useful information through him. The blonde was willing to admit that he may have been a bit hasty in dismissing this man so quickly the last time they met. I had not realized I was so famous, Naruto continued, sending off a small, almost unnoticeable probe for information. The comment seemed completely innocuous, it was not even a question. But if Sayo was like the majority of people, he would be unable to resist spilling at least some of the information he had. Sayo gave him a lazy grin. I may know a little more than most, he admitted with a casual shrug. The blonde paused, taking a moment to ponder those words. There was just something about the way he had said them that made the blonde think hidden meaning. If there was ever a time when Naruto would actually need to use Kakashi-sensei's old adage of looking underneath the underneath, then now was that time. Am I to take it that very few people actually know of my title then? Asked Naruto, presenting his theory. It was the only thing that made sense to him. Higazumi had known of his title, but according to the man's secretary, he had some secret means of acquiring that knowledge. The blonde had assumed that meant only the so-called Ashikabi of the East, and the man working under him had known about his new title. But that didn't seem to be the case. Very few Ashikabis know about your title, Sayo freely admitted with a shrug. In fact, I'm almost certain that I'm one of the only ones who do. However, a small, almost perverted grin spread across his face. There seem to be a number of unwinged Sekirei who know about you. After all, the scruffy Ashikabi leaned back as he continued. They were the ones who gave you that title. So the title he had gained had not been coined by Ashikabi, but by Sekirei, and unwinged ones at that. Now that was something Naruto hadn't quite expected. Then again, the title had to come from somewhere. It would be just as easy to believe it had come from an unwinged Sekirei, as it was to believe it had come from an Ashikabi. In fact, when put into perspective it made more sense that his title had come from an unwinged Sekirei. If it had come from an Ashikabi, then no doubt there would be more people like Sayo and Izumi who knew of it. Sayo had just admitted that there was very little chance of other Ashikabi knowing, and for some reason, Naruto was inclined to believe him. Of course, Izumi knew as well, but he had some way of gathering that kind of information. As did Sayo, apparently. You learned that from Hikari and Hibiki, didn't you? Naruto said as he realized just how Sayo had gained this information. You Sekirei have been hunting unwinged Sekirei again, haven't they? He accused. As Naruto spoke those words, he was once again overcome with an intense feeling of Not quite anger, more like disapproval. He just couldn't understand why this man was allowing his Sekirei to hunt down unwinged Sekirei. It was wrong. To not allow Sekirei a chance to find and be with their Ashikabi was an unforgivable crime. How could he not see that every Sekirei deserved a chance to find love? It did. It took him a moment to realize that these were not actually his feelings. Naruto frowned, blinking. He shook his head and closed his eyes so as to better focus inward. He began shifting through the emotions he was feeling, the ones he recognized were not his own, following them to their source. And when he did, Naruto was both surprised and not so surprised, feeling he should have somehow expected it. Misubi. She was the one feeling these emotions. How odd. While Naruto had always been able to feel his Sekirei's emotions to some degree, and even their thoughts on occasion, he had never been able to feel them so strongly before. It was almost as if she was projecting herself onto him. For a moment there, it felt as if he had become Misubi, and she him. This was unexpected, and unnerving. He had known that the bond between Sekirei and Ashikabi was strong, how could he not? But he had never even deigned to think it could be this strong. To think that a bond could be so powerful it could actually impose the will of another on him. It was an unnerving prospect, and just one more problem in the long list of growing issues that he was having with this whole situation. His thoughts and attention were snapped back to reality when Misubi stood and slammed her hands on the table, making everyone, even Naruto and Miya, jump. Akitsu was the only one who didn't jump, but that was more because of her personality and slowness to movement in all things that didn't involve Naruto. Kusano had jumped though, and was now staring at Misubi with wide blinking eyes. How could you? She demanded of Sayo, looking at him with a glare. Yes, a glare. One that could probably melt steel if it were capable of being put into a physical power. It was a look Naruto had never expected to see on the naive and childish girl. Misubi was not one to take things seriously. She was the kind of girl who was always happy, always smiling, and was something of a scatterbrain. This new look, it was unnerving to see on his normally happy and kind, albeit slightly insane and battle-crazed, Sekirei. Eh? Sei blinked, leaning back from the look from where he sat. How could you let your Sekirei continue to hunt down those who have yet to find their Ashikabi? She demanded once again, this time elaborating her accusation a little more. Don't you know how important it is for all the unwinged Sekirei to find their destined ones? By defeating them before they find their Ashikabi, you're denying them the chance to find love. Hey, it's not like I'm the one going out and defeating unwinged Sekirei, Sayo defended himself from the normally excitable girl's accusing stare. They're Sekirei, Misubi accused. You could easily tell them not to fight unwinged Sekirei anymore. I'm sure they would listen. Sayo actually snorted at that. You obviously don't know my Sekirei very well, he told the girl, and Naruto actually had to agree. From what he had seen of Sayo's relationship with his Sekirei, much as he may deny it, he was not the one wearing the pants in that relationship. Misubi frowned at the man. With her first avenue of getting the man to listen to her blocked off, she whirled on Naruto and gave him a pleading look. Naruto-sama, she began pleadingly. Please make him see reason. I'm sure if it were to come from you, he would realize I'm right and talk to his Sekirei about what they're doing. Naruto almost flinched, not just at the tone in her voice as she spoke, but at the pure honest feelings coming in through their bond. The bond between a Sekirei and their Ashikabi was something Misubi truly believed in with all her heart, and the thought that Sayo would just let their Sekirei trample over that bond bothered her intensely. More than anything else right now, she wanted Sayo to see her side of things, and at least make an attempt at reining his Sekirei in. It was hard not giving in. Almost impossible even. With such intense emotions directed at him, such an earnest look combined with those pleading eyes, Naruto truly wanted to do exactly as she asked, convince Sayo that he needed to talk with his Sekirei about not fighting unwinged Sekirei. This desire, this need to help the girl in her quest was almost overwhelming. Just fighting through the current sea of emotion she was pushing towards him was a task in and of itself. I wouldn't do any good, Naruto gasped, beginning to feel lightheaded. He shook his head, trying to clear it. Even if Sayo did listen to me, I'm not sure his Sekirei would listen to him. He has seen the way the lightning twins had acted. There was no way they would listen to Sayo for something so, to them at least, mundane. But surely if Naruto-sama spoke to him, Sayo-san would talk to his Sekirei, Misubi tried again. The eternal shinobi glanced away from her, unable to look the girl in the eyes. Perhaps, he admitted. But it's not Sayo that needs to be convinced. The blonde got the feeling that Sayo didn't really care one way or the other. Though he could just be reading the man wrong, and he simply didn't want to get zapped by lightning for saying something his Sekirei might consider stupid. But it isn't Sayo that would need to be convinced, he finished. Then talk to Sayo-san Sekirei, Misubi pleaded, her hands held together in a prayer sign under her chin. I'm sure that if it were to come from Naruto-sama those mean lightning twins would listen. Why do you think they would listen to me? Asked Naruto, frowning at the girl's now desperate last gambit. I'm not their Ashikabi, I'm just some guy who they happened to run into, and someone who stopped them from trying to terminate you. They wouldn't listen to me, hell, they don't even listen to their own Ashikabi. Don't you want to help the other Sekirei find their Ashikabi, Naruto-sama? Asked Musubi, tears gathering in the corner of her eyes. This time, Naruto did flinch when he looked at her. Don't you care about whether or not the other Sekirei find love? Even if I did, Naruto started slowly, trying to word his answer carefully. I wouldn't be able to change anything. But what about the other Sekirei being allowed to find love? Asked Musubi in a tiny whisper. She seemed almost confused. It was as if she didn't understand why Naruto wasn't as determined to help the other Sekirei find love as she was. What she didn't know was that Naruto had stopped believing in love a long time ago. Love? Naruto would have scoffed at the notion Musubi was putting forth. She seemed to be of the belief that if all of the Sekirei could just find their Ashikabi, everything would turn out for the best. At least, that was the general feeling he got from her. However, her comment had brought a number of memories he had buried a long time ago, or so he thought. The girl with pink hair, tears in her eyes as she pleaded with him to bring her loved one back. The pain he felt, even as he promised to do just that. That way, even if he was unhappy, at the very least the girl he loved could find her own happiness. Not every Sekirei would even find their Ashikabi, the one they were apparently supposed to love for all eternity. Naruto had already seen how Sekirei could be entered into bond via forced winging by those Ashikabi, who were unscrupulous enough to do so. A young woman with dark hair and lavender pupilless eyes, staring down a man who had just destroyed their home and come close to killing him. Her confession of love for him before trying to defend him and getting struck down for her effort. Musubi just didn't seem to realize that even if every Sekirei found their Ashikabi, they would just be taken away again when they were defeated. That same pink-haired girl, now a young woman, her eyes lifeless, blood leaking out of her mouth and a gaping hole in her chest, the edges frayed to signify that it was done by a lightning-based assassination technique. What good was finding the one you loved if they would only be taken away from you in the end? The woman with dark hair and lavender eyes, staring at him with such love and emotions that were no less intense now than they had been 1 year ago, even as she bled out, her blood staining the ground and mixing with the rain. What would it matter if they found their loved ones, their Ashikabi, anyways? Nanaka had said it himself, the Sekirei plan would only end when the last Sekirei was left standing. Another woman lay before him. This was even more beautiful than the others. Her silken blonde hair lay about her in a halo, and was partially dyed red with her own blood. Large angelic blue eyes were staring at nothing, the colorful eyes were dull as the once vibrant woman's life was extinguished. More and more images flashed through his mind, all of them on the people he loved, the people he lost. Naruto grit his teeth, and brutally shoved those memories to the side, knowing they would only hurt him if he continued. Love isn't enough to save them from the Sekirei plan. Musubi flinched, and stumbled back as if she had taken a physical blow. Worse still, the blonde felt the girl's pain through air bond, like taking a kunai to the heart. The pain in Naruto's chest grew in proportion to the girl's own pain. He watched as his first Sekirei ran through a gauntlet of emotions, confusion, disappointment, sadness, depression, so many emotions, and each one of them made his chest tighten and sting. It was quite possibly one of the most horrible emotional pains he had ever met, running up there with the deaths of his friends. Before he could say or do anything else, Musubi fled the room, the sound of her hurried footsteps disappearing as they heard her running up the stairs, followed by the slamming of a door. Silence descended upon the room following the noise, none of the people there knowing what to say, or in the case of one of them, deciding it would be best if he didn't say anything. The only one who did not seem to be affected was Kusano, who was simply too young to truly understand what was going on. Naruto sighed as he closed his eyes. God, he felt like a prick. How could he have hurt Musubi like that? He wasn't sure why his words affected the girl so much, but if what he had sensed through the bond was any indication, he might as well have just ripped her heart out. It would have been a mercy killing compared to this. Was this the kind of person he had become? Had his inability to connect and bond with others become such a liability that even now when he had truly bonded to another person in a quite literal sense, he ended up being so callous? Uzumaki, Naruto called out in a tired voice, making the normally perky Sekirei focus on him. Surprisingly enough, she had been the one who looked the most affected by Naruto's last statement. Before the blonde had called her, the expression on her face made it obvious she had been struggling with her own thoughts. Maybe she was in a situation where she had an inkling of what the eternal shinobi felt. Could you please go upstairs and make sure Musubi is alright? He asked. Shouldn't you be the one doing that? Uzumaki questioned him with a frown. Naruto sighed. I think it would be best if perhaps someone else was supporting her right now, Naruto said softly. After what he had just said, he wasn't at all sure if Musubi would actually want to see him. Hell, if someone had just done what was essentially ripping his heart out with a rusty kunai, he wouldn't want to see them. I'll be up after a few minutes, once she's had some time to calm down without my presence hindering her. There was another reason why Naruto didn't want to be in her presence right now. Two, actually. The first was this bond. After he had spoken those words that sent Musubi away, Naruto had felt her emotions like a physical blow. It had been as if someone had dropped the Hokage monument on his chest, and then decided to have every Akamichi in Konoha use their expansion jutsu, and begin jumping on it for shits and giggles. The blonde honestly wasn't sure he would be able to do any kind of good with that much physical pain. The second wasn't quite as selfish. It was that he didn't want Musubi to be affected by his own emotions, if such a thing were possible. Naruto had a theory that if he was capable of experiencing the emotions of his Sekirei, then there was no reason not to think his Sekirei could experience his. So far there had been no indication if that was true, but the blonde didn't want to take any chances. Uzumaki stared at him for a few seconds longer before, with a sigh, she relented. "Alright, I'll go check up on her," she said, standing up and making her way to the door. She stopped at the edge of the shoji screen. "You owe me for this," she gave him one last parting comment before disappearing from view. "Uzumaki-kun." At the sound of her voice, Naruto turned to look at Mia. She was staring at him with both of her purple eyes gazing at him with a look that somehow mixed calculating with concern. He wasn't quite sure what to make of this expression, but a part of him felt strangely vulnerable to it. Like he was being stared at from under a microscope. "I'm fine," Naruto told her, turning his head away to take in the rest of the room's occupants. As always, Akitsu was looking at him, even during the altercation that had erupted between him and Musubi. Her eyes had not left him. It was both unnerving and reassuring in a strange sort of way. Kusano still just looked confused. It would be obvious to anyone with mild observational skills that notice. At the other end of the spectrum, Sayo was once again giving him a sharp look. It was another reminder that the scruffy-looking Ashikabi, for all his ability to put his foot in his mouth, was a surprisingly canny man. "Hello. Excuse me." Whatever Mia may have been about to say was interrupted when a pair of familiar voices. She frowned for a moment, her eyes lingering on him, before with her usual grace, stood up and began making her way out into the hall. Naruto cast a glance at Sayo when he heard a soft thump, and turned to see the man making his way into the kitchen. Frowning, he too was about to stand up when a smithing gently bumped against him. Looking down, he saw that it was Kusano. Her eyes were closed and her breathing even. She had fallen asleep. "Akitsu," he said to the ice user, who blinked in acknowledgement. "Would you mind putting Ku-chan to bed?" he asked. Akitsu nodded slowly and stood up. "Okay," she finished. Naruto gave the ice user a very brief smile of gratitude at her acquiescing to his request, before lifting Kusano and handing the green girl off to her. While he hadn't said anything, he was pleased that the snow woman was so easy to deal with when compared to Musubi and Kusano. As Akitsu began to slowly leaving the room, Naruto sighed, stood up, and made his way out into the hall as well. It was just as he was making his way to the entrance that the blonde caught the sound of Hibiki's voice. "We're sorry to interrupt," Hibiki started, and as Naruto came up behind Mia, he saw her rubbing the back of her head with an apologetic expression on her face. She hadn't seemed to realize that Naruto was here yet, which may or may not be a good thing, depending on how she might react. Instead, she was looking at Mia as she spoke. "But is that idiot mooching off you again?" Once again there was a familiarity to her words. This situation had likely happened numerous times in the past. "Mooch? Why do you say that?" Two tick marks appeared on the girls' heads, right before they began to lay the beat down on Sayo. A large cloud of smoke appeared over the trio, with the only thing being visible was the occasional foot, fist or head. Several stars also appeared to shoot out of the cloud, whether they were some kind of special effect, or actually did something no one knew. And for the sake of their mentality, everyone watching the scene decided it would be best if they didn't know. Because it's what you always do, you freeloader. As Hikari and Hibiki began to lay the smackdown on Sayo, beating the ever-living crap out of him with fists and feet, Naruto and Mia both sweat dropped. Yes, Naruto decided right then and there, even if he had managed to convince Sayo to talk with his two Sekirei, no good would have come of it. It wasn't that long before Sayo and the Lightning Twins left, the two females of the trio apologizing profusely to Mia for their Ashikabi's unscrupulous behavior. The sight of the two bowing over and over again chanting the mantra we're sorry, 1,000 times we're so sorry as they held onto a large 50-pound bag of rice, each had been amusing enough that Naruto had almost been able to put the conversation between him and Musubi into the back of his mind. Almost. Their comedy routine may have been more effective if it hadn't been for the fact that Naruto could still feel Musubi in the back of his mind. Her emotions may have calmed down, but she was still rather distraught. The Eternal Shinobi knew he would have to apologize to her. It was the right thing to do, and even if it wasn't, as long as this situation remained unresolved, he would be unable to think properly, because of the fist fighter's feelings being transmitted to him over the bond. With a sigh, Naruto watched as Mia closed the door, and was about to begin making his way to his bedroom in order to, as they say, face the music, when a hand was lightly placed on his shoulder. Stiffening under the unfamiliar touch, he turned, almost startled when he saw Mia standing behind him. "A moment before you go upstairs, Uzumaki-kun," Mia said. The words sounded almost like a suggestion, but Naruto could tell otherwise. Whatever she wanted to say or ask, it must have been important. Naruto didn't say anything, but he did give a nod of assent, and silently made to follow the lavenderette as she began walking down the hall. Maze and Izumo had a lot of shoji screen doors. They passed by a number of them before coming out to the one that led into the courtyard. Mia sat down, calves hang over the edge of the raised platform, her feet just touching the ground. After a moment or two of hesitation, Naruto followed suit and sat down, using his hands as support beams as he leaned back. For a moment everything was silent. Mia was not looking at him but at something else entirely, something only she could see. Her eyes were unfocused as they wandered the halls of her own mind, perhaps remembering something from her past. It was as Naruto was beginning to wonder what she wanted to speak with him about that she asked, "Did you mean it?" When Naruto tilted his head questioningly, she finally turned to face him, her eyes fully focused on his. "When you said that sometimes love wasn't enough. Did you mean it?" Naruto studied the woman before him a bit, studying her as he wondered just how to answer that question. There were so many ways he could answer it, from moving around the subject, to giving a very vague answer that wouldn't really tell her anything, to simply giving a one-word answer, and expecting that to be the end of her questioning. Within the confines of his mind, Naruto weighed the pros and cons of each choice he was presented with. Finally, with a heavy sigh, Naruto turned his gaze back out to the yard where Musubi and the woman sitting at his side often sparred. "I've been in love before, you know," he started, his eyes wandering over to the sakura tree he had first met Kusano. "I've loved a lot of people, to be honest. After all, there were many different kinds of love, the love of a brother, a friend, a son, a father, a husband, so many endless ways to love another that putting all of the variety of ways into words couldn't truly do it justice. And I've met a lot of people who believe that love is the most powerful force in the world, that no matter what odds you face, so long as you are with the ones you love, you can overcome them." The blonde frowned as he thought of his own experiences with love. And in some cases that may very well be true. When people are fighting for their loved ones, they're much more determined to succeed. The love they have for the people they cherish forces them to push themselves beyond their limits. There have even been documented cases of women gaining incredible strength in order to save their children. I remember hearing one story in particular, where a woman managed to partially lift a car when her baby was stuck inside after it had been flipped over. And that's not even mentioning what two people who are in love can accomplish together. Almost absently, Naruto thought of the couples he had known back in the elemental nations. The one that sprang to mind the most was Sakura and Lee, his first crush and the girl he had ended up loving like a sister, and the taijutsu master who had eventually surpassed his sensei. During the 4th Great Shinobi War, they had been one of the most powerful pair there. The two of them alone had managed to cut a large swath of the Zetsu clones that had been harassing the allied shinobi forces. Not only that, but they had both been able to hold off the Kinjin Kimdi, the Gold and Silver brothers, Kinkaku and Kinkaku, after they had been resumed by Kabuto, when the man had finally managed to escape from Itachi's Izanami technique. Long enough for Naruto and Kurabi to arrive and help seal the pair away for good. There had been many other shinobi couples that had proven to be powerful as well: Temari and Shikamaru, Tenten and Iji, Konoha and Hanabi, Mogi and Yuden, Hinata and Kiba. So many shinobi kunoichi pairs that had been able to stem the tides of battle long enough for him and his, at the time, partner in arms Kurabi to arrive and lay waste to whoever stood in the way. Yet even these amazing shinobi, these powerful couples had eventually been defeated. Sakura and Lee had been killed by Sasuke when Naruto and Kurabi had been forced into battle with the Razuman Uchiha Madara. Temari and Shikamaru had been killed by Kabuto himself, ambushed during a scouting mission to look for enemy weak points, and come up with an appropriate counter-strategy. Tenten and Iji had eventually been overwhelmed by Zetsu clones, after getting cut off from the rest of the allied nations' forces. Both Konoha and Hanabi, and Mogi and Yuden, had been killed during a mission to seek financial aid from Yuki no Kuni's daimyo, Kazuhana Koyuki. Kiba had been killed during a botched mission to find and kill Kabuto, sacrificing himself so that Hinata could escape with the information of the man's location. Surprisingly enough, Hinata had survived, though she was killed days later by Sasuke, when Naruto had been ambushed by revived Gaara and Tsunade, and Kurabi by his brother, all of whom had been killed by Uchiha Madara before they could enter the fight. Naruto had arrived just in time to watch her die, unable to do anything more than cry his sorrows to the heaven. But even as amazing as love sometimes is, there are some enemies that love just can't defeat, Naruto said, looking over at Miya, who was watching him with a gaze that was both studious and uncomfortable. It seemed his words were hitting the woman a bit close to him. Standing up, the blonde dusted himself off and gave the woman one last glance. "As I said, sometimes love just isn't enough," he finished, before beginning to make his way back inside. "Naruto-san." The blonde paused at the doorway, turning to Miya with a curious look. That was the first time she had called him by his first name, and added a "san" suffix to it. Given that she had never called him that before, whatever she wanted to say must be serious. "Yes," he said, making a hand gesture for her to continue. Miya shifted, perhaps unconsciously, to look at him better, bringing her legs over the lip of the wooden platform, and under her thighs in a feminine position. If love is not the greatest force in the world, then what is? Naruto closed his eyes and turned away. He didn't even need a second to ponder that question to know the answer. Time, he told her, not deigning to look back and see her response. There is nothing in this world that can defeat time. In time anything could change, anything could be lost, it was both the beginning and the end. People, culture, laws, the very landscape could be changed if given enough time. All civilizations have been toppled by time, the remains of those ancient communities now nothing more than ruins. People were born with time, and in time, they died just as sure as they entered this world. Truly, there was nothing that time couldn't destroy. Even Naruto was a victim of time in his own way. After all, time might not have been able to kill him, but for all the life he had lived, he might as well have been dead. With a heavy sigh, feeling the weight of his years, Naruto walked back into Maze and Izumo, leaving Mia to sit where she was with a pensive look as she pondered the blonde's words. No doubt she was trying to discern some hidden meaning behind Naruto's answer. It was unfortunate for her that she wouldn't find one, because in this instance the eternal shinobi's words had been the truth. And yet, the truth he had given was so unbelievable that it likely only someone who was capable of coming up with the craziest ideas and theories would ever be able to know that he was being honest. Somewhere in Karakura town, a young high school student with long orange hair, large breasts, and a hairpin sneeze while eating leeks slathered in butter and red bean paste. As he made his way up towards the stairs, Akitsu fell into step behind him. Naruto glanced casually over his shoulder, taking note that nothing seemed to have changed in this snow woman. Throughout the entire night, with the sole exception of when Mia had unveiled her Hanyu mask, Akitsu's composure had not changed. "Kuchan's been tucked into bed, I take it?" Naruto asked. He was sure that was the case seeing as the green girl was no longer with Akitsu, but he felt it better to be sure just in case. After all, this was the woman who forgot to wear panties in public. Akitsu tilted her head to the side, then looked back at where she had come from. "Yes," she determined with a nod, her head turning back to look at Naruto. Said blonde just gave a nod of his own, as he and the ice user made their way up the stairs. When they got there, it was to find Uzume leaning against the wall next to the door to their room, her arms crossed under her bust, and the index finger of her left hand tapping a staccato rhythm against her arm. Upon hearing their footsteps she looked up. "About time," she said, uncrossing her arms as she pushed herself off the wall. "What took you so long?" she asked with a curious look. "Mia wanted to talk to me," Naruto told the Sekirei wearing the star shirt. His eyes flickered towards the door, then focused back on Uzume. "How is she?" he asked. The bond wasn't helping as much anymore, and he couldn't get a proper read on the girl's emotions. They seemed to have settled, but with that settling down Musubi's emotions once more melded together in the static rhythm that was Akitsu and Kusano, making it impossible for him to determine her emotional state. "She's fine," Uzume said with a shrug. "She stopped crying a while ago, and I've just been standing out here since then waiting for you." Naruto winced a bit at the "she stopped crying" bit, but didn't react otherwise. "Thank you," Naruto said, bowing slightly at the waist to show his appreciation. No problem," Uzume said with her customary chuckle. She began to walk down the hallway towards her room, patting Naruto on the shoulder as she went. "Now go take care of your girl, bro. You've got some making up to do." Naruto grimaced, not just because of her words, but because he knew she was right. While it may have been done unintentionally, his words had hurt Musubi deeply. He knew that he had to set things right, the only problem was he didn't know how to do that. Naruto had been with hundreds of women, thousands even. He knew more about how to get a woman into his bed than anyone else alive, and he knew more ways to please a woman than anyone else alive. Hell, he had practically reinvented sex. However, that meant little to nothing in this case. All the experience and knowledge on how to properly seduce and please a woman in bed held no bearing here. This wasn't some random chick he had picked up for the night. If she had been, then he wouldn't even be in this situation in the first place. This was Musubi, one of the women he had unintentionally bonded to, the first one he had bonded to. They were connected on a level that went beyond physical boundaries and into the realm of the spiritual. And whether he liked it or not, that meant they were, for lack of a better term, boyfriend and girlfriend, perhaps even more. After all, there wasn't a much higher form of union than being bonded together in a way that was so profound Naruto could actually feel her emotions at all times. "I know," Naruto muttered, more to himself than to Uzume. As the Sekirei in question walked a few feet to her own room, Naruto took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and decided to just get this over with. He had no clue what he was going to do, but when he was determined to do something, a little thing like uncertainty wasn't enough to stop him. This was just another mess he had found himself that he now had to get out of. That was all there was to it. Entering the room with Akitsu following behind him, Naruto took a quick moment to look around. The room was the same as it had been for the past few days they had all been living here. The sun was shining in through the window a deep red color, showing that the day's events after the movies had taken quite a while to get finished. It looked like dinner would have to wait for a little while, unless Mia had already gotten started on it. And standing near the window, casting a shadow along the tatami mats as the light hit her form, stood Musubi. Naruto hesitated. What should he say? What was the appropriate way to apologize? Just saying I'm sorry didn't feel like it would be enough to make things up to the girl. He had really hurt Musubi with his words. There was no way a simple apology would be enough to make things up to her. Even if Musubi was an unusually kind and enthusiastic young woman, the fact remained that she was still a young woman. Naruto doubted that even she would forgive him so easily for what he had said. Hell, with their situations reversed, Naruto would have had a hard time forgiving her. Musubi, he started, taking a hesitant step forward. Beside him the clink of chains let him know that Akitsu was walking with him as well. He wasn't sure she was just following him because that's what she always did, but he couldn't help but feel slightly grateful for her presence. Maybe it was just because she was so unobtrusive, but the snow woman really was beginning to grow on him. The girl he had called out to turn away from where she was watching the sun as it set beyond the horizon. She blinked several times as they adjusted to the change in light. After all, staring directly at the sun and then looking into a semi-dark room with only the slight rays of sunlight that managed to sneak into the room was a pretty big change in lighting. After a moment, her eyes had adapted enough to make out the two figures in the room, though she only had eyes for Naruto at that moment. Ah! The girl chirped in a cheerful voice, causing the blonde to blink. Naruto-sama. I didn't hear you come in. Have you been standing here for very long? There was no sign of the previous tears she had shed, or the pain she had felt anywhere on her face. Focusing on their bond, the blonde couldn't quite pin down Musubi's emotions, and separate them from the other two he had winged, but none of them held any kind of negative emotions. It looked like the fist fighter had well and truly bounced back from her previous depression. Ahem, Naruto coughed into his hand, now even more unsure on how to proceed. It would have been hard enough dealing with the girl when she was depressed, but now he wasn't even sure what to do. Was she still sad? Was she just hiding her feelings so well that even the bond couldn't pierce the veil of her facade? Or had she truly recovered so quickly? I haven't been here long, I just got here a few seconds ago, he said, wondering what he should say next. So he shifted, feeling unusually nervous. How are you feeling? The blonde almost cursed himself for asking something so stupid, but that was all he could really think of to say at the moment. I'm fine, Naruto-sama, Musubi said, tilting her head in puzzlement. Why do you ask? Well, she couldn't really have forgotten about what had happened just a little under half an hour ago, could she? You were pretty, distraught, after our conversation. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. Well, I was a little upset, Musubi admitted, still smiling brightly. After I got up to our room I felt pretty sad. I thought about going to sleep, but then I saw the sun beginning to set and couldn't help but admired. I would have done some training, but I already trained with Landlady Sama today, so I thought it might be a good idea if I just relaxed instead. Gotta rest my muscles after all, she finished, knuckling her head and poking her tongue out while she did so. I'll listen, Naruto started, sounding less like an immortal male who had lived through war and constant heartbreak, and more like an unsure teenager who didn't know how to properly apologize to his girlfriend for being an ass. For all his experience in life, this was practically new territory to the blonde. How long had it been since he had even made an attempt at forming a relationship with someone else? Anyone else? A long time, too long in fact. None of those relationships had ever ended well, you just couldn't maintain a meaningful relationship when you were like him. It was simply impossible. Damn it. Why did this have to be so difficult? All he had to do was apologize and find some way to make it up to her, right? Then why did he feel so lost and confused? Maybe it was because she didn't even seem to be angry at him. It might have been easier to apologize if Musubi actually was cross with him, and it wasn't like he didn't deserve her ire after what he had said to her. Well, maybe he should just come out and say it, and then go on from there. I did think about what Naruto-sama said, Musubi continued, interrupting the blonde before he could even begin. At first I didn't know what to think, she said, and it was here that she began to walk towards him. But then I realized what the problem was. Naruto blinked, nonplussed by her words. She was in front of him now, a warm smile on her face that when combined with the slight halo effect being caused by the slowly dying sun's rays, made the creature before him seem truly angelic. I realized that Naruto-sama just doesn't understand why it's so important for us Sekireis to find out Ashikabi. Actually, Naruto thought he had a pretty good idea of why, or at least a decent one. If nothing else he could determine that an Ashikabi was important to a Sekirei due to the bond they formed, though its deeper meanings were lost on him. He still didn't know what a Sekirei was, after all. His thoughts were derailed instantly when Musubi grabbed his left hand in both of hers, and placed it upon her breast. For a moment all Naruto could feel was the soft roundness of her, as his palm rested against it. She wasn't wearing a bra, and he could feel her nipple hidden only slightly by the fabric of her kimono top. By the gods above, she really didn't know what she was doing to him. Can you feel it, Naruto-sama? She asked, and Naruto wanted to shout yes to her, but only just managed to hold his tongue. My heart. It's beating so fast. The second phase of her question had the immortal shinobi pausing. It took him a second to realize what she was talking about, but when he did, he could feel it. The way her heart was beating, the way it was racing within her chest, the rate continuing to increase as if just being in his presence was enough to set her blood pulsing. "I can feel it," Naruto whispered, his throat feeling strangely parched. Musubi's heart was no longer the only one that had started to increase. Naruto could feel his heart hammering in his chest, beating in time to the hastened pace of Musubi's own blood-pumping organ. He had to wonder, if only to himself, was this also a part of the bond? Was the way his own heart had sped up to match hers due to the bond they shared between them? Or was there another reason he was feeling this way? "I love Naruto-sama," she stated, a quiet conviction in her tone. It was just like the last time she had told him that, only without the naked straddling that particular incident had involved. That quiet conviction in her tone that destroyed any and all thoughts of protest. It was the same as the last time. "Whenever you're near me, my heart beats like this. Whenever you smile, or laugh, whenever you do things for me like carrying my clothes or washing my back. Even a simple touch from you is enough to set my heart racing. This is my love for you, this is what I feel when I am with you." Musubi looked at him, and Naruto almost felt himself melting on the spot. Such an intense look of longing should be considered illegal. Was this another part of the bond? Naruto couldn't doubt her words, even if he may have during her first confession, he couldn't doubt them now. It wasn't just her words, or the conviction in which she spoke them. Nor was it just the beating of her heart and the frantic pace it set. He could feel it, her love for him, it was there, inside of his soul, in that little spot his heart had made for Musubi. Once more Naruto had no time for thinking further, because Musubi had grabbed his face with both of her hands, and brought him down, so she could place a kiss on his lips. Brilliant wings flared out behind her, pushing against the desk and wall, the wood that made the building straining under the strength that was being pressed against it. Naruto was just thankful he had yet to set up a computer, or it would have likely gotten squished. And then his mind had no room for any other thoughts, as his entire focus became consumed by Musubi. The feel of her lips so softly on his own, her arms as they snaked around his neck, her body as it was pressed against his. And in the corner of his heart that had been created for the bond that had been formed between them, he could feel her presence, a bright light of warmth that seemed to cast away the darkness of his life. It was almost too much for him. He had gone so long without the light that Naruto was not really sure how to deal with it. He loved the feeling it gave him, but another part of him just couldn't comprehend it. It was almost like when you stepped out into the light after sitting in a pitch-black room for several months and stared directly at the sun the moment you came out. It was nearly blinding. When the kiss finally ended and Musubi pulled back, her eyes fluttering open, she gave a smile. "Do you understand now, Naruto-sama?" she asked. "Do you understand these feelings I have for you?" I do," Naruto murmured, and he did, he really did. After this display it was impossible for him not to. Really, how could anyone not understand that after the way this girl had confessed her love for him? It was impossible for him to truly understand what came over him in that second, or what possessed him to do what he did. At the moment, Naruto was feeling so many emotions he could only identify a quarter of them, and even if he understood the significance of the others, it was unlikely he would understand the reason they were. In many ways, Naruto was still a child when it came to his emotional development. He had never grown up the way other kids had, being an orphan and a hated one at that. He never had parents to help him develop a healthy emotional mindset and mentality. And while some of that had been fixed after he became a genin, one can't just expect 3 years of training with his godfather to fix 12 years of neglect. Perhaps, if Naruto had been allowed to develop afterwards things would have been different. Maybe if the Fourth Great Shinobi War had never happened, Naruto could have grown from the childish state his emotions had been into those of an adult. And quite possibly, if Naruto's very existence had not become the curse it was today, he might have been able to become the man he had been meant to be. It was impossible to tell now, however, and hindsight was always 20/20. Whatever the case was, Naruto's body moved with a mind of its own as he closed the distance between him and his Sekirei. His arms went around Musubi, embracing her, holding her to him as he rode out the emotional storm that Naruto was in no way prepared to deal with. "Naruto-sama?" Musubi asked. The sound of her surprised and questioning voice was muffled slightly as Naruto held her to his chest. He was a good deal taller than she was. At 181 centimeters, he was a decent bit taller than a lot of people in Japan. Musubi only came up to about the center of his chest. Hesitantly, perhaps in response to his surprising action, she wrapped her arms around the blonde's waist. He could feel her as she turned her head and pressed her cheek against his chest. Undoubtedly she could hear and feel the fast-paced beating of his heart that was still matching time with her own. "Musubi." He tried to say them, he really did. Those 3 little words that his first Sekirei had bandied about so easily. Perhaps it was because of how moved he was, or maybe he just thought it would be kind to return her gesture. Whichever was the case, Naruto truly wished he could tell her those 3 little words that likely held far more meaning to the girl in his arms than any others. But he couldn't. He couldn't tell her that, not when he was still unsure of whether or not he truly felt the same as her. Not when he didn't know if these feelings were genuine or because of their bond. Not when Naruto wasn't even sure if what he was feeling was truly the same as what Uzumaki felt for him. And perhaps the most important reason he couldn't was because no matter how much he may want it to be true, no matter how much he may want to return this girl's feelings, in the end, it would only be a fleeting moment that left more bittersweet memories. "I'm sorry," he apologized. Usubi's head shifted until her chin was resting on his chest as she looked up at him, confusion evident in her eyes. No doubt she was trying to figure out what he was apologizing for. "Sorry for what, Naruto-sama?" she asked, and Naruto grimaced, before planting a smile on his face, one that he had not worn since before he had found out why he had been so hated in Konoha. "For what I said earlier today," he lied. There was no way he could tell her the truth, especially when that truth was likely to hurt her more. Sometimes it was better to just keep certain things to yourself, if for no other reason than to spare someone else the pain that would come from that knowledge. And make no mistake, Uzumaki would be hurt if he said "I'm sorry, but I don't think I can feel the same way about you that you feel about me." Uzumaki beamed a smile at him. "It's okay," she said immediately. "Naruto-sama just didn't understand, but now that I've explained it to him I'm sure he does." "Yeah," Naruto plastered on a weak smile that was nowhere close to reaching his eyes. "I certainly do." And that just made things worse, but because he did understand, and he wasn't sure he wanted to. This girl had just bared her heart and soul to him, and Naruto wasn't even able to do the same, wasn't able to grant her the same level of commitment that she was, and perhaps most importantly of all, he wasn't able to tell her those 3 little words that would have meant the world to her. Those 3 little words that she herself could say with such conviction that he was left with no choice but to believe her. Naruto couldn't say "I love you." Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.